Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone. So today we are going to work on the strength-based approach, and this is webinar 1 of 4. If you're doing the online training, then this is part of the first set of lessons on the strength-based approach in a series of 4 lessons on the strength-based approach. My name is Kendra Hansen, and I'm the Institute Director, and I was trained on the strength-based approach by Annie Callahan, who is one of the creators or co-creators, you could say, of the strength-based approach. And the reason that this is so important to your work at Wellspring Living and why we emphasize taking this online course as soon as possible, just in case that other courses in person aren't readily available due to scheduling, is because it's really the foundation for the work at Wellspring Living. It's the foundation in the sense that it's how we interact with others, it's how we interact with participants, and it's really the state of mind that we utilize in order to meet the needs of the participants and meet them where they are in order for them to gain healing and strength and a renewed sense of purpose in our programs. So that's what you're here for. And this webinar will be about 15 to 20 minutes. And the rest of the webinars will be similar in length. Some may be a little bit longer, but this will give you time to be able to do the other requirements of the lesson. So thanks for being here. I'm Kendra Hansen, and this is the Strength-Based Approach Webinar 1. We'll be talking about honoring through the strength-based approach, how it is more honoring to participants. We'll also talk about what are strengths and really looking at that in a different way. We'll also look at defining strength-based work. What does that actually mean? You may have heard it several times already in your time at Wellspring, and defining that is going to be important for our work. And then we'll begin to touch on, but not go into great detail about why the strength-based approach. Why is it important? Why is it something we want to focus on? So strength-based defined, we want to go over different types of strengths that we might not think of. So you see Popeye there. He is obviously known for strength and in a cartoon way. But we want to make sure that we're able to analyze our participants' strengths, the people that we work with, and our own strengths. And so looking at that in a new way will be helpful in adding to the list of strengths that we could come up with ourselves. So if we were in in-person training, we would ask for you, and you can be thinking about this, to think about your strengths and what it is that brought you to the work that you do at Wellspring Living. And I'm not talking about a paycheck or anything like that, but I'm talking about why this job instead of a different job. So what brought you to this type of work? So when we look at strengths, we can talk about talents, and we can talk about the different areas where it's obvious that we're talented, or that a participant is obviously talented at writing or singing or hair braiding or math or navigating a map and MARTA and stuff like that. So we might think of them as just naturally talented at certain things. That's usually what comes up and what is oftentimes most thought of as a strength. But we also want to look at personal characteristics. This is another one that is more popular or obvious and evident. Our personal characteristics. What does that mean? That just means things that are naturally part of your kind of personality. So, what is it about you that is just a natural strength? Are you a born leader? Are you able to be quiet? Are you self controlled and able to bite your tongue in situations? What is it about you and the way you're designed that is a strength? This is another one where we can think of lots of times that's our go-to when talking about types of strengths. But we also want to focus on past successes and accomplishments. Oftentimes that's somewhat overlooked with the strength-based approach. So past successes and accomplishments, this is important because we want to focus on where somebody was successful before and how can we make that kind of success happen again. So that would be your past successes. Where did somebody really feel confident beforehand, and how can we help create that confidence again? Where did somebody feel really in control of their recovery, and how can we help create that in control of recovery feeling again? We also want to value healthy coping skills. So with healthy coping skills, we are looking at how people are able to manage in inconvenient or distressing situations. Many of our participants come into our program without some obvious healthy coping skills. Maybe that's why they're in our program in the first place. However, we all have our own unhealthy coping skills, our own crutch, and what we want to focus on is where we were healthy. How did we get through a distressing situation before? Were we able to walk away? Were we able to kind of compartmentalize and think about it later? Were we able to tell ourselves that this is not the end of the world and really focus on being optimistic? So helping participants be able to develop their own healthy coping skills is a huge part of our program at Wellspring. And then attitude. So we always are often attracted to people who have a healthy attitude about life. What things are really important, what things are really not important, and we can move past very easily. So we want to focus on attitudes about life, about our future outlook. Things like that are all parts of strengths. Then we also want to value capacity for insight, attachment, and empathy. Sometimes these three items are difficult, and all difficult according to research on trauma for insight, attachment, and empathy. Oftentimes those are characteristics that our participants are working on while they're in our program. Sometimes it's a goal for them to be more empathetic or to create healthy attachments with supportive community members in creating their own sphere of influence. So we want to focus on that as something that can be a strength. So is there capacity there? And of course, usually the answer is yes. So we also want to look at cognitive abilities. Again, this is something that people oftentimes go for already, but we don't want to just think about like who is smart and who's doing really well in school or their GED and got it, accomplished it really quickly, but we want to think about who's able to problem solve and who's able to be creative. Those kinds of things are strengths as well. And then learning style. Learning style is a strength. Oftentimes our participants come to us and many times their learning style is more kinesthetic, which means movement. They want to move while they're learning. So how can we help them teach themselves and build on the strength of learning while moving and continue to grow that? Extended support system is another view of a different type of strength. And oftentimes we don't necessarily think of it that way, but we know that people with extended support systems have various strengths, and kind of have various strengths already in their lives, directing them, helping them, just being there for them. So that can be a strength as well. That's something that we look at when participants graduate our program, is what does their support system look like? And then areas of interest in the same way. If somebody has an interest in something, it means they are drawn to it for whatever reason and they want to learn more about it. So simply having an interest area is a huge strength. We want people to be able to explore and to learn, and that is taking control of their own learning and their own experiences. So areas of interest are huge areas of strengths. Last one, interpersonal skills. That's how we relate to others. So this you'll probably notice pretty quickly as well as those first few, the talents, personal characteristics, cognitive abilities, and interpersonal skills. Those are all more obvious strengths that we naturally observe, but being able to identify these are really helpful in how we relate to, encourage, and interact with those in our program, as well as our colleagues. So the strengths base defined, this is a definition of the work. It's really the ability to recognize and use one's own strengths. So that's why we just went through the previous slide and really looking in detail as to what strengths could potentially be. And so we really want to be able to recognize and use our own strengths. And how we do that would be knowing what we're good at, being able to volunteer for a, an activity or whatever it is that we know we can manage. It's just being a team player and where your own personal skills are going to add the most value. And knowing that about ourselves is really important in how we interact with others. It's also the ability to discover and amplify strengths in others. So this is where it comes into our work with participants. We want to be able to kind of really uncover maybe some strengths that they may not have known that they had, or that really no one's ever kind of called out in them. And we want to call them up to that person that we know they can be through building on these different strengths. And being able to do that is so important because it helps them to be able to identify their own strengths and be able to recognize their own areas of value and importance, and it adds to their sense of self-worth. There's also the ability to link a client's strengths to solutions and challenges they face. So we want to be able to make sure that our participants in our program, or in this term, clients, that we can recognize their strengths, but also direct them as to how they can use those strengths in the challenges that they are facing currently or may face in the future. This empowers them and gives them hope in ways that they can, through their own autonomy, be able to overcome those obstacles in life. Through their own recognition of how strong and empowered they are, they're able to then face challenges more quickly, with more strength, with more insight and optimism as well. It's also important to find strengths in colleagues and to contribute in positive ways to staff. In the idea there is honoring and support of one another's unique strengths. So we want to make sure that we're able to work well with each other to achieve our common purpose, and recognizing strengths in others and your colleagues or in volunteers or board members who you may interact with is going to be helpful in achieving the overall mission of Wellspring. So a few more definitions. So strength-based defined. We want to look at assessment. What strengths does this person have that is already there that can help them cope with problems that they face, or that problems that may come up in their lives? So we want to analyze this, and some of that is done by the clinical team, and some of that is done just in our everyday interactions with helping to be able to see participant strengths, and in moments where maybe a situation is escalating and this participant chose to walk away. Maybe she mumbled stuff under her breath and cussed everybody out in the room under her breath, but she walked away from the situation. That is a strength in that moment, to be able to walk away rather than get in some kind of confrontational position. There's also everyday life questions. So what are strengths that we can remind youth, or we can remind the women of daily, that will help them to be more successful? How can we encourage daily activities that play toward their strengths? This is one of the reasons that we have so many different life skills, and that we try to offer so many different experiences to our participants at Wellspring Living. We want them to be provided with a range of opportunities, areas where they can be successful, areas where they can grow. We want to make sure that they're able to feel empowered and to be empowered to make their own decisions about their lives, and that they are given the chance to make those decisions in a positive and healthy way through exposure to different activities and life skills, as well as therapy. And then staff and colleague questions. Again, this is with our interactions with each other. So what are my strengths as a person? How can I find ways to build them into my work role? What are strengths of my peers and supervisors? How can I be supportive of them and helping as crises develop? This is just a way that we want to work as a team and acknowledge the strengths in others and what we have to bring to the table as well. So in our society is problem focused. It's more of a medical model, right? So if I go to the doctor and something's wrong with me and I'm trying to describe it to the doctor, I want him to be problem focused. I want him to be focused on what is wrong, and I want him to find what is wrong and make it better, or her. So that's our society, and that's kind of how we learn. We're always thinking about, what issue could come up from this situation and how do I navigate around that, or how do I prevent it, those kinds of things. In the strength-based approach, we want to be solution-focused. So we want to be focused on creating possibilities, and not always looking at problems, but looking at the positives from the situation that came up. So what does that mean? We'll go through some examples, and we'll also practice in the next session. So problem focus would be, why'd you do that? Why did you do that? Why? That creates blame. It creates shame. Solution focus would be, I'm guessing you had a good reason for doing that. I would love to understand what it was. Okay, I always say this is not when they have just pushed somebody down the stairs or something like that. We're not going to stand there and say, I'm guessing you had a good reason for pushing her down the stairs in the moment. No, we're not. We're going to, do our best to handle the crises, make sure everyone is okay, and move forward. And then we're going to debrief. And then we may say, it seems like you thought it was a good idea to do X, Y, Z. I'd love to understand your reason for that. Still, that person is going to have a consequence and all of that, of course, because it's physical safety. All of those things are still going to happen, but we want to focus on the solution. Why was that the solution that the participant chose in that moment? And instead of saying, why'd you do that, which creates blame and just a quick kind of self-covering response, we're going to get different answers if we say it the solution-focused way. Essentially, it's asking for the same reason, though. Problem focus might be, I'm taking your privileges away until you learn your lesson. That is saying, you haven't learned your lesson yet. You're pointing out the issues. You're even saying, I don't know when you're going to learn your lesson, but you're going to figure it out, and you've got to get this done because this is a problem that I'm not going to deal with anymore. That's essentially what we're saying there. Solution focused is, what ideas do you have for how you might handle things differently next time? This solution-focused response asks them to look inside of themselves and think through what it is that they can do next time. It asks them to really analyze and evaluate their actions and what they achieved the previous time before that, which could have been a consequence as far as they might have how they might have handled something. But how can they move forward in a positive way, knowing that that past wasn't the right way to do it? But instead of focusing on the past, how can we move forward positively? So what are some ideas for handling that next time? That gets the participant to come up with their own solutions rather than us telling it to them. So problem focus might be, he's such a troublemaker. That's kind of name calling. That's putting someone in a box. That's labeling. So we want to come up with a different response, which is, if he can harness that energy for positive things, he'll be able to accomplish a lot. So it's just a frame of mind, a shift in the way of thinking, harnessing it for positive energy to accomplish a lot. Some more, one last one for problem focused. Things might have been better today, but I'm keeping my eye on you. This kind of wording is not helpful. This kind of language is very blaming. It's very distrusting. It's basically saying, you may have been good today, but this isn't who you are. So I'm watching your behavior. And then that's not helpful. That's very blaming. That's very negative. It's focused on the past, and that the participant, really underlying that is that the participant is never going to change. Instead, we want to say, what did you do differently today to make things go better? So we want to focus on the fact that they're making small positive changes towards accomplishing goals and healthy, positive, pro-social coping skills. So I think I'm right on the money as far as 20 minutes. And I'd love for you to complete the session, Strength Based 1 of 4, and we'll see you again on Strength Based 2 of 4.